My ex-wife demanded I split the $127,000 I saved for my kids among her 6 children, so she sued me for support. But the judge exposed her, and now she'll never forget what he said in court. I'm 42 years old. I work in construction since I was 19, and what I'm about to tell you is probably going to sound unbelievable, but I swear, it's all real. My ex-wife basically tried to steal my children's future to give it to her new husband's kids. And when I say tried to steal, I'm not exaggerating. She literally wanted my kids to share the money I had saved for them for years, with a bunch of children who aren't even mine. But anyway, let's start from the beginning because this story is long and complicated, and I need you to understand the full context so you can see how absurd all of this was. I divorced Sarah about 8 years ago, when Ava was 10 and Mason was 7. The marriage just didn't work out, you know. We got married really young. I was 24 and she was 23, and by the time we hit our 30s, we realized we wanted different things in life. It was relatively civilized. I mean, it wasn't a bloody war with lawyers fighting over every dish. We reached a 50-50 shared custody agreement because we both loved our kids and wanted to be present in their lives. Truth is, I felt pretty good about the arrangement. Like, I could see my kids half the time. We didn't have to pay child support because everything was equitable, and each of us took care of our expenses when the kids were with us. It seemed fair. Since Ava was born, I started saving for her college education. I don't know. I always knew I wanted my kids to have more opportunities than I did, and even though I do well in construction, I didn't want them to have to start working as young as I did if they wanted to study. I'd open savings accounts, put money in every month. They weren't huge amounts at first, but it was consistent. When Mason was born, I did the same thing. Each one had their own account. Then, when the kids were like 4 and 1, I had an accident at work. Nothing super serious, but I injured my back and had to be out for several months. The company gave me a settlement of $45,000, and after paying medical bills and all that, I put $30,000 directly into the kids' college funds, $15,000 for each one. Sarah agreed at the time. In fact, she told me it was an excellent idea to secure their future. 3 years after that, my Aunt Helen died. We didn't have a super close relationship, but she never had kids, and she always liked Ava and Mason. She'd see them at Christmas and birthdays and stuff like that. Turns out she left me $60,000 in her will, which was a total surprise. Again, after taxes and everything, I put $50,000 into the kids' funds, $25,000 each. By the time I got divorced, between my regular savings and those 2 big chunks, each kid had like $48,000 saved up. I kept saving after the divorce, like $200 a month for each one, and with interest and everything. By the time this story really starts, Ava had about $65,000 and Mason about $62,000. 1. Sarah got remarried about 2 years after the divorce to a guy named Brian. Okay, Brian has his own complicated story. He has 2 kids from 2 previous relationships, a boy who was 16 and a girl who was 14 at the time. And then he and Sarah had 2 babies together over the next few years. I mean, suddenly Sarah went from having 2 kids to having 6 in the house because Brian's kids lived with them full time. I'm not gonna lie. I thought it was crazy, but it wasn't my problem. You know? As long as my kids were okay when they were there, I didn't get involved in their decisions. The first few years after they got married, everything seemed normal. Ava and Mason would tell me about their step-siblings. Sometimes they'd complain that the house was too full or noisy, but nothing serious. Brian worked in car sales. He didn't do bad, but not incredible either. And Sarah was a dental assistant. With 6 kids, the expenses were obviously enormous, but again, not my issue. I paid for everything that corresponded to my kids when they were with me, bought their clothes, school supplies, extracurricular activities, everything divided equitably according to our agreement. So about 2 years ago, when Ava was 16 and Mason was 13, Sarah called me and said she needed to talk to me about something important. We went to a Starbucks near my house, and she showed up with Brian, which already seemed weird to me because normally we talked alone about kid stuff. They sat across from me, and Sarah started with, "We need to talk about the kids' future and about what's fair." I was like, "Okay, I'm listening," thinking maybe they wanted to adjust the custody schedule or something. But no. Brian went straight to the point. and said, "Sarah told me you've been saving quite a bit of money for Ava and Mason, and we thought maybe you could help us by paying a little more child support so we can also save for all our kids." I just stared at them like, "What?" I told them, "We have 50-50 custody. There's no child support because each of us covers our expenses when the kids are with us. That was the agreement." Sarah said, "Yes, but you clearly have more money available to save. It would be fair for you to contribute a little more so all the kids have the same opportunities." And that's when I started to understand where this was going. I told her, "Sarah, the money I've saved for Ava and Mason comes from years of work, from a settlement for an injury I had, from an inheritance from my aunt. It's not money that I just have left over every month." She kept insisting, saying that she and Brian were struggling to make ends meet with all the household expenses, that it wasn't fair that my 2 kids had college funds while the other 4 had nothing. Brian then said something that left me cold. He said, "Look, all these kids are siblings now, they're a family, and in families you share everything. Maybe we should think about dividing those college funds equitably among the 6 kids, so everyone has something." I sat there trying to process if I had heard correctly, and then I literally laughed, like I couldn't believe it. I said, "Are you suggesting that I take the money I saved specifically for my 2 children and distribute it among 6 kids, 4 of whom aren't mine at all?" Brian got defensive and said, "They're your kids' step-siblings. They live together. It's cruel that 2 have all this money and the others have nothing." Sarah added, "Besides, Ava and Mason spend 50% of their time in our house. They're part of this bigger family. They should share." I don't know how I didn't explode right there. I told them very clearly, it's not going to happen. That money is for Ava and for Mason. Period. I'm not going to finance Brian's kids' education. That's Brian's responsibility and the responsibility of those kids' mothers. Sarah started with, "But I thought you cared about us as a family, that you wanted what's best for all the kids." And I'm like, I care about my children, who are Ava and Mason, and I want what's best for them. The other kids have their own parents who should worry about their future. Brian got angry and said I was selfish, that I was creating divisions in the family, and I just got up and left. Truth is, I was so furious that I knew if I stayed I was going to say things I'd regret. I thought that was the end of it, that they had gotten the message, but oh no, it was just getting started. About 2 weeks later, Ava came to my house crying. She was 16, almost 17, and she was super stressed. She told me that Sarah had sat her down at the kitchen table and told her it was time they talked about the college money. According to Ava, Sarah told her she had a lot of money saved while her siblings had nothing, and that wasn't fair, that she should consider sharing part of her fund with them because they're family. Ava told me, "Dad, I didn't know what to say. I felt horrible, like I was a bad person for having that money." That's when I lit up. I told Ava very clearly, "That money is yours. I saved it for you your whole life. Nobody has the right to ask you to share it, and you're definitely not a bad person for wanting to use it for your own education." I explained to her where the money came from, about the accident, about Aunt Helen, everything. She calmed down a bit, but still felt bad. Like that's the effect of emotional manipulation, you know? You make someone feel guilty about something they shouldn't. The next day, I called Sarah and literally yelled at her on the phone. I told her to never, but never, bring our kids into this money issue again, that if she had problems with me, she should discuss them with me, not with a teenager. She acted offended, saying she was just trying to teach Ava about family values and generosity. Family values and generosity. My ass. She was brainwashing her to give away her future. I told her very clearly, "If you pressure Ava or Mason about this again, I'm going to have problems with you. This ends now." She said I was overreacting, that it had just been a conversation, but I knew that wasn't true. Things calmed down for a few months, or so I thought. Turns out Sarah had just changed strategies and was being more subtle. Mason, who was 13 at the time, started having problems at school. His grades dropped, he was distracted, his teachers called me concerned. When I sat him down to talk, at first he didn't want to tell me anything, but finally he broke down and told me there was a lot of tension at his mom's house. He said, "Sarah." And Brian constantly made comments about how some kids had advantages that others didn't, about how it was important to be generous with family, about how money shouldn't create divisions among siblings. They weren't pressuring him directly like they had done with Ava, but the message was clear. They were making him feel guilty constantly. Mason told me, "Dad, sometimes I feel like I'm bad for having that money. The other kids look at me weird when I talk about college and I know I have everything paid for, and they don't." It broke my heart to hear him. I explained the same thing I had explained to Ava, that the money was his, that I had worked hard to give it to him, that he didn't have to feel bad about it. But a 3-year-old kid shouldn't be dealing with this shit, you know? He should be worried about Xbox and soccer, not about family politics and financial manipulation. I confronted Sarah again, this time in person. I met her at a Dunkin' Donuts and told her, "We need to talk right now." We sat down and I asked her directly, "What part of Let It Go didn't you understand? Mason is having problems at school because of all this pressure you guys are putting on in the house." She acted surprised, saying she didn't know what I was talking about, that they had never mentioned the money specifically to Mason. I told her, "You don't have to mention it specifically. You're creating an environment where my kids feel guilty about something they shouldn't, and this stops now, or I'm going to seek full custody." That scared her a little, I think, because she knew I had a good case. The kids were happy with me. I fulfilled all my responsibilities. I had a stable job, my own house, everything. I told her, "Look, I understand things are difficult with 6 kids, but that was your decision and Brian's, not mine. And it's definitely not Ava and Mason's responsibility to sacrifice their future for the decisions you guys made." She started crying, saying they just wanted all the kids to have the same opportunities, that it wasn't fair that 2 had so much and 4 had nothing. I told her, "Life isn't always fair, Sarah. And your job as a mother to those other 4 kids is to find a way to provide for them, not to steal from your own biological children." I thought I had finally made it clear, but Brian didn't give up. About 3 months later, he called me directly. I was at work when I saw his name on the screen, and almost didn't answer, but I did. He told me they urgently needed help, that they had medical bills for one of his kids they couldn't pay, if I could lend them $5,000. I asked him, "What about insurance?" He said it didn't cover everything. I told him, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that. I suggest you talk to the kid's mom's family or find another solution." He got angry and told me, "You have over $120,000 sitting in bank accounts, and you can't lend $5,000 to help a sick child?" I said, "That money isn't mine to lend. It's Ava and Mason's. And besides, how did you know exactly how much was in those accounts?" He was quiet for a moment, and then admitted that Sarah had been checking the statements when the kids were at my house. Apparently, she had seen the papers on my desk or something. I got furious, told him that was invasion of privacy, that they had no right to be snooping in my finances. He said that since the kids spent time in both houses, they had a right to know what was going on with them. I hung up on him, literally couldn't keep talking without exploding. That night, I moved all the kids' accounts to a different bank and put all the documentation in a safety deposit box. I also talked to Ava and Mason and explained to them that never, under any circumstances, should they give information about their college funds to anyone at their mom's house. Ava, who was already 17 by then, understood perfectly. Mason was more confused, but also understood it was important. Things came to a head about 6 months before Ava graduated from high school. She had already been accepted to 3 universities and was deciding between them, all good options she could pay for with her college fund. Sarah invited her to lunch, just the 2 of them, and according to what Ava told me afterward, Sarah made one last attempt. She told her, "Ava, you're going to be 18 soon. That money is technically going to be yours, but I want you to think about your siblings, about the sacrifices we've made, to give you a home, about how important family is." She suggested she take only half the money for herself and divide the other half among the other 5 kids, like $6,000 for each one. So everyone has something. Ava called me crying from the restaurant parking lot. She was devastated, like she couldn't believe her own mother was asking her that right before going to college. I told her to come to my house immediately. When she arrived, we sat down and had a very serious conversation. I told her, "Ava, you don't owe anyone anything. That money is yours, It's for your education, for your future, and any pressure they put on you to distribute it is pure manipulation. She said, "But Dad, what if they're right? What if I'm selfish?" I told her, "You're not selfish for wanting to use the money your father saved for you for the exact purpose it was saved for. That's literally the opposite of selfishness." I called Sarah that night and warned her one last time. I told her, "If you pressure Ava about this again, I'm going to take legal action. I don't know exactly what legal action, but I'm going to find something." She yelled at me, saying I was turning our kids into selfish and materialistic people, that I was destroying the family. I told her, "No, you're destroying the relationship with your own children because you can't accept that your bad financial decisions aren't their problem." She hung up on me. 2 weeks later, I received legal papers. Sarah was suing me for child support. In the documents, she argued that she was the primary caregiver of the children, that I didn't contribute sufficiently to their expenses, and that I needed to pay retroactive child support in addition to future monthly payments. It was absolutely ridiculous. We had documented 50-50 custody. I paid everything I was supposed to. I had receipts, bank statements, everything. My lawyer told me it was a baseless case, but we still had to go to court. The hearing was surreal. Sarah and her lawyer argued that she spent more time with the kids because when they were at my house, I worked long hours, so technically she was more of a caregiver. They presented a calendar where they had marked every hour I was at work as time they were caring for the kids, which was absurd because the kids were at school most of that time. Her lawyer also insinuated that I had substantial resources I should share, mentioning the college accounts. Although my lawyer objected immediately because that money was specifically designated for the kids, it wasn't my personal money. My lawyer presented all the documentation: the original divorce agreement that specified 50-50 custody without child support, the custody calendars signed by both of us for years, receipts for all the expenses I covered, tax returns, everything. He also called Ava to the stand, who by then was already 18 and could testify. The judge asked her about her experience living between two houses, and Ava was very clear. She said she spent exactly half the time with each parent, that both took good care of her, but that at her mother's house she constantly felt pressured about the college money. The judge asked Sarah directly if she had been pressuring the kids about the college funds. Sarah tried to deny it at first, but the judge showed her text messages that my lawyer had obtained, where she literally wrote to Ava things like, "Don't forget to think about your siblings, and money isn't the most important thing in life," when Ava had sent her pictures of her first campus visit. Sarah couldn't explain those messages in a way that made her look good. The judge was very direct. He said there was clearly a 50-50 custody agreement that had been working for years, that there was no evidence I wasn't fulfilling my responsibilities, and that the kids' college funds were irrelevant to child support determination because that money belonged to the kids, not me. He rejected Sarah's lawsuit completely and warned her that filing frivolous lawsuits again could result in sanctions. He also told her, and this made me feel so vindicated, "Ma'am, your attempts to pressure your children to share their college funds with other children are inappropriate and potentially harmful. I suggest you seek family counseling if you can't handle the dynamics of your blended household." Sarah left the court furious and didn't talk to me for months, only communicated with me through short text messages about logistics with the kids. Brian sent me a long, aggressive message telling me I was the worst person he knew, that I had destroyed his family, that my kids were going to grow up to be horrible people because of me. I blocked him. I didn't need that negativity in my life. Ava started college the following semester. She chose an excellent state university where her fund covered absolutely everything: tuition, books, housing, food, everything. She even had money left over, which we left invested for grad school if she ever wants to do one. She's studying biomedical engineering, she's doing amazing, and the best part is she doesn't have to work during the semester. She can focus completely on her studies. Every time she talks to me about her classes or her projects, I feel so proud and so relieved that I protected that money. Mason is 15 now. In 2.5 years, he's also going to college. His fund keeps growing. It's already at almost $70,000. The relationship with his mom is still tense, but it's better since she and Brian finally stopped pressuring about the money. I think the defeat in court made them understand there was no way they were going to win that battle. Last week, Ava called me excited to tell me she had gotten a paid internship for the summer at a medical device company. They're going to pay her well and she's going to be able to save that money for the future. She told me, "Dad, thank you for never giving in, for protecting my future even when Mom made you feel like you were the bad guy." I almost started crying. I'm not gonna lie. I told her I would always protect my children, no matter what, and that I was incredibly proud of the young woman she had become. It still makes me angry when I think about everything that happened. Like, who asks their own children to sacrifice their future for someone else's kids? I understand that blended families are complicated, that resources aren't always equitable, but there's a line between teaching generosity and manipulating your kids to give away opportunities you worked years to give them. Sarah crossed that line over and over again, and honestly, I still have a hard time forgiving her for that. But in the end, my kids are okay. They have their futures secured, and they learned an important lesson about setting boundaries and not letting themselves be manipulated. I guess that's what matters.